6:30 p.m. Monday, May 18th, 2020, via video teleconference. Ms. Talbot, roll call, please.
Mr. Boroway.
Present.
Mr. Jenks.
Here.
Ms. Nichols. Chairman Orris.
Here.
Mr. Slocum.
Here.
Mr. Talbot.
Here.
Mr. Veliver.
Here.
And Mr. Walsh.
Here.
We have a quorum. We have a quorum of the full council, and we have a quorum of the budget committee.
All right, please rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. And at this point, I'll turn it over to our budget chair, Mr. Boroway.
Thank you, Mayor Orris. Good evening, everybody. I think what I would like to do is first ask if there are any updates. And I know we did receive an updated spreadsheet. So after we talk about other updates, I want to review that spreadsheet and I want to get people's thoughts because it did update a little bit, but generally order of magnitude stayed about the same. It was just a refinement of numbers from what we talked about last, oh boy, was it Wednesday? I think Wednesday. They're all running together. So anyway, Sean, town manager, I'll hand it over to you if you've got other updates, and then we can review the spreadsheet and get people's thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think most of them are contained in the spreadsheet. We could certainly walk through that. And I know Jim made a few edits. Jim, do you want to kind of walk through some of the retirement pieces? I'll put it up on the screen. I know there were a few kind of minor changes, but maybe a quick recap for everyone would be helpful.
Yeah. John, are you going to put that on the screen?
Let me go ahead. I will do that right now. Give me 1 second.
And I noticed you added a column whether you consider them to be one-time savings or not, which is helpful because that was requested as well.
Right. So that was one of the discussion items. And again, I think some of these are open for interpretation a little bit on as to what one time would mean. So we could certainly talk through some of those, but we did take a first stab at those that we felt confident are one-time savings expected, or one-time cuts expected to be returning in the next year. So Jim, do you want to start on this tab and just kind of walk through some of the edits you made?
Yeah, all right. Yeah, I think maybe I'll start with some of the more significant ones. Obviously we had a lot of position cuts in the in this document, and so we calculated the Social Security. That's line 17, and also a lot of these were new positions. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Coming through? Yeah. So a lot of our new positions are either in the 401A, as in the case of the police department, or the 457 defined contribution plan. So again, these reductions on 17, 18, and 19 are all commensurate with the position cuts that we have listed above. So I know we did make a few very, very minor changes because some of the numbers that were in your document last week were rounded numbers, so I don't really want to dwell on those. We just trued them up to what the actual amounts should be. I know the recreation position was one that was rounded, and we just it's now 52,762. And the pool subsidy, I think there's going to be some further discussion on that, but that number also increased from what you saw last week a little bit. Again, a lot of it had to do with the Social Security and pension implications of position cuts. So I think that's really all I would want to focus in on this. And then on the revenue side, there was one additional revenue favorable variance to our miscellaneous revenue. We were notified last week that CCM is going to distribute 1/2 of our contribution to them in the way of a distribution sometime next year to alleviate some of the consequences of COVID-19. So I think that's a no-brainer. We put that in. And outside of that, I don't know if anybody has any specific questions.
Well, by my count for staffing, it looks like we are talking about reducing full-time positions by 4 and reducing the 6 temporary part-time pages. Well, the 4 positions: police, recreation secretary, assessor or assistant assessor, depends on how you want to word that, and then the town engineer. And then 6 temporary part-time pages, and then the public works summer help. I don't remember how many people that is, but it's only, part of the year anyway. So that looks like a significant reduction in the size of our staff. But I think when we reviewed each department, we're looking at the expectation that we would provide similar services to the public and, make it work, because the goal is to, be as frugal as we can with the taxpayers' dollars, especially this year, more so than ever. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I
again,
do-
these, I just want to throw out, these are the general fund, mostly reductions. There are also reductions on a separate tab for the pool and WPCD. Again, yeah, okay, so just a reminder that on the WPCD side, so on the top of this screen, the town engineer, that was, if you recall, we were going to eliminate that position and replace it with the consultant. So you'll see that there's a negative 22,500 here. This is like the mere adjustment of what we did on the general fund to eliminate the town engineer. And then the electrician, 17,112. That is the reduction from 40 hours back to 30 hours on the electrician. And again, on the pool and WPCD, we added the applicable Social Security and pension benefit reductions.
Hey, Jim, before you move on, just so I don't forget, on that electrician position, did you
Yeah.
guys add back in the overtime savings? Because there
I
was
did
savings
not.
that we were going to get in overtime if we went to that position.
Now that
Was
you're
that the net
mentioning it,
number?
yeah, I'm going to have to go back and check what that was, but you're absolutely right. I remember the conversation on that.
I
I'll make
think
a
they
note and get
forgot
that
to put it in.
tomorrow night.
So I
Because
think
Yeah, I think that was
initially
offered-
they had forgotten to put it in.
Right.
Then they
Yeah.
came back to us and adjusted the overtime to accommodate for the savings. So I just want to make sure that we're pulling those,
Yeah.
assuming we can't get those savings in overtime by not having this full-time job, that we're looking at a net number here.
no.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be a net, because we didn't assume that in the initial proposed budget. So it's now back to where it was before when I presented it.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Sorry, Jim.
Sure.
Yeah, all right, no, you're absolutely right. And then the pool, I think if you recall, that's down a little bit further. I think Sheila in her budget had assumed a lot across the board increases on a lot of the lifeguards to keep them a little bit above minimum wage. And so this 56,000 is basically taking that out of the wage. So regardless of whether there's any decrease in pool activity, these are the cuts on their personnel that I think we can take it into consideration.
Hey, I had a
I-
question, if I could just, because
Sure.
I don't, before we get too far away, going back to the first page where you had the list, and we had the $70,000 for the tipping. Is that set in stone, or because I know, Sean, you were talking that could increase even higher than that, or is that, because I don't want to say 70 and then find out that it's going to be 100. Do we know?
Yeah, we still don't know. And there's been some late breaking developments even this afternoon. And again, I think we've mentioned at the last meeting, there's a few things that we'll have to review in executive session to discuss on that. But I think the information's gotten a little bit better there. But again, it's going to depend, first of all, on who the operator is in part as we were trying to work through that situation. But the 70,000 I think is still a good number. I don't think we need to go a lot higher to that into a $100 tip fee, $100 ton. I think the area that we're at, where we're kind of settling in around somewhere between 90 and 100 is going to be a good number. So I'm still comfortable with where we are. I think there's a lot that has to kind of flesh out with the situation between Covanta and Country. So there's more to come.
I just
on
want to
that,
make sure, because
for now,
I don't want to find out that we have that, and then next thing you know, it's going to be another 10 or 15 or 20,000 more. So you're comfortable with that? That's fine with me. I had one other question.
I'm comfortable enough. I don't. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's fine. As long as you, because I understand there's other things that have to come into play with that, so we can discuss that in executive session. But the other issue that I had a question about was, it's probably George will have to answer, the summer labor. I don't know what he had these, the college kids doing was mowing lawns or whatever. So now that's going to fall back onto the workers. I'm just hoping that it's not going to be because, these kids normally did that and we were paying 75,000. It's not going to add up that we're going to have to be paying overtime to get this stuff done that these kids would normally do, because, and I don't know if George, if you can just ask George, how does he make that up? If he had maybe 5 kids working for the summer, mowing all the lawns and doing all this other stuff, who's going to do that stuff now?
So, yeah, I can take that. That request for the 75,000, if you'll recall, that was kind of a placeholder number that we had I think, derived off of George's last, slide in his presentation on more, not to call them discretionary, but those items that could be adjusted. What we've done is gone back to George to ask if that's not fully 75,000 all summer worker kids. It's a balance between the construction line. I probably should say more. It's supposed to be construction and the summer labor accounts. And I think actually, Jim, did you get I know there's a breakdown in what George would prefer to see if we were cut.
Yeah, we know that with Lou and George today. And so of that 75, 25,000 is construction. And then 50 from a combination of highway, streets and roads and Parks Division labor. Specifically 15,000 out of the summer help for highway, streets and roads, and 35,000 from the Parks Division. Okay,
so it wasn't all 75,000 mainly summer help then. Okay, that's what I was just
concerned.
No,
I mean, go ahead, sir.
No, I was just concerned that it was going to be, we're taking away these jobs from these kids who would do all this stuff, and then are we going to end up having to pay overtime to get this work done? And I just didn't want that to happen, but it doesn't sound like that's going to happen.
Sure. I mean, largely, some of this is going to depend on what, of course, the landscape looks like with respect to, fall sports and even spring sports for that matter. As some of the work that's done, including, the club leagues and whatnot, some of the lining of the fields and whatnot is done by the summer kids in, supplementing some of the other work in the summertime. So some of it's going to depend on how many of those organizational leagues are active over the summer, with respect to which some of the, we just don't know the answer to. But we were trying to find a balance to get to that 75,000 number that didn't maybe take it all from one spot, leaving us with no options. And certainly we don't want to see this impacting overtime. So we're gonna have to keep that into consideration for sure.
Thank you.
Hey,
I get a question, if
Tim,
I may.
Before we get going, Tim, I just got notified that Channel 14 has no sound. So I can't imagine that's something that we could manage on our end, is it? Is Mike there? Mike, is there any way you can monitor that?
I can check, but we're not live on 14 right now, so it must be a pre-recorded.
We're not
pre-recorded
live?
meeting. We don't ever go live to 14.
Oh, okay, so I'm not.
We're live on
sure.
YouTube.
I just got a text from someone who's supposedly watching and said there's no sound. So I will find out if that's the case.
They were right. Hey, I had something, if I may, before I leave.
Sure. And that's right. You have to go. a little bit.
Yeah, the question goes to actually a decision that we'll be talking about later. But I was wondering if we did respond in a way favorable to the request of the housing authority, that would go to a reduction in revenue and offset by the same amount or reduction in cost. So our general government cuts of 855 could go down to generally 825. I suppose about $30,000. Is that about right?
Did I hear expenditures or?
Well,
Did
I
you
know
say
it's
revenues?
not going to reduce our expenditures, but the bottom line is it's going to reduce the impact of those expenditure cuts if in fact we have a loss in revenue because of some forgiveness of pilot money, correct? So
Correct. Yeah, the overall impact
that
would be going the other
so
direction.
that would draw from quote unquote surplus or something like that. That's sort of how we cover for that. I mean, how's that actually wash out? Because the
So-
housing authority doesn't really have a
And-
budget with us. It's a revenue line.
Correct.
So
Right. Just
you
like
have
any
to
other.
give
So
me-
it would.
But I think that should be part of the conversation later whenever you guys discuss it.
Sure. So it would basically, I mean, depending on the percent, I think, the council could determine whether to go all the way to 0 or stay at the 10% now. But whatever that agreed upon number would be plugged in here as going the wrong direction, so to speak, on the revenue increases. So this is where you'd see it, and then that would flow through the rest.
Right. But the bottom line is it would be a reduction of whatever we decide to anything we do.
Correct. Right.
And we're
That's
going to
correct.
decide how we pay for it, because it's going to be assuming it's going to be a permanent thing unless we decide we're going to sunset it or whatever. But again, that's a discussion for later. I just wanted to ask where it was going to fall in. I assumed it was on a revenue decrease.
That's correct. Yep. Just on the revenue side.
Thank you. Now I'm going to do my stage right. I'll be back.
All right, Tim, we'll see you. Is there other discussion, I hope, from other council members regarding the list of potential reductions or adjustments as well as the revenue? I want to hear people's thoughts on this.
What's the both increase and decrease? What do we add up to? We've got to be getting to a pretty significant number. Yeah. Okay.
There should be 1.77 million.
Can we see?
Now, if it,
Sorry, it says that's the one. Yeah, I was going to say, can we see it on there?
So right at the moment, and these cells are now kind of feeding off those first tabs. This would bring us to a current quote unquote mill rate of 33.51, which leaves 0.29 mils still to go to the 33.22
But
that we are this year.
sorry, Sean.
No, go
But
ahead.
That's
fine.
also just looking at a literal $100,000 BOE increase. That's it
Correct.
on their side.
Right.
This is all being done on the town side.
Right.
and
At
you're
the
only
moment, this is just the
0.29
town
away.
side. Right. And so the overall budget, as you'll see, kind of see that here, on the general government side, we would be going up 1.25% as opposed to what the original budget was. And yes, the Board of Ed at this point is actually up higher by 100,000 than what they had approved.
Say that again. You're still showing an increase on the general government side.
Correct. Yeah, that should be, yeah. So let's see here. Let me go back to, let me pull up my book to give you the actual number. I don't want to mess with the cells. Yeah, because the general government, the budget, this cell here that's now 408,
Yep.
and the proposed budget of the general government was going up $1.259 million. So that 800,000 855 over here that's now coming down leaves an increase of 408.
Scroll up that left,
1.2.
that far left column, just stop right there. So the revenue. Okay, got it. I understand. All right, thank you.
Sure.
And that $1 million revenues increase is the amount of surplus that's going to lapse from all the departments, Board of Ed and general town government, into available surplus, into fund balance at the end of the year.
Correct. So it's currently assuming
Over and above.
that. Right.
Okay.
Right.
Over and above what you had budgeted. Okay. Yeah, there you go in the blue
correct.
box. Okay.
Right. So these two here to combined. Now leaving us back where we were before all of this started in March with a projected current year fund balance increase of 400,000.
David?
Yes. Oh, sure. Rob. Yep. Sorry.
So Sean, and maybe this was where Peter was going, but we're all kind of looking at these charts a little differently. So just so I understand it, I think, in order to get to our zero mill rate increase, we need $2.6 million in cuts or revenue, correct? Additional revenue? We found $1,021,000 in combined town and Board of Ed COVID savings, correct? That breaks out roughly 73% the board and 27% the town. Is that correct? See, there's your $1,021,000. That's essentially the COVID savings, correct? From the 20 budget.
No. So that the $1,021,000 is adjustments to fiscal 21.
Can you pull that up? Can you
COVID savings
look at that column? Because I can't see this whole sheet. That's why this is really difficult for us when we're doing this at home. Right. So you've got 850. Well, keep going so we can see the town side.
So this is so you're looking for, so the $1,021,000, maybe it's easier to see it here. The $1,021,000 is this number right here, right? And these are the adjustments that all of the revenue adjustments, that two of them are derived from some of the funds that have been generated from the current year. These first two. Portion of fiscal 20 savings applied.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
The rest are.
Yeah, but hold on. So the 265 and the 747 are essentially COVID-related expense savings, correct?
Correct. That's
from this current year.
Right.
Yeah, I think you can make that argument. Yep.
Okay, because you're saying it's 21, and that's not the case, Sean. I want to be clear what you're saying, because I interpret both of those to be savings that the Board of Ed told us they would have from this year's budget, and the 265 is what you put on the table from this year's budget in terms of cost savings.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's
I'm
going to say, so basically that's the $1,021,000. The rest of it kind of works its way out. There's not a whole lot more there.
Right. And the rest of, that was the only point I was making. The rest of it's sort of a wash because just the fact that these two numbers are basically that.
So it's not from 2021, it's from 20 savings.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So
it's
let me
adjustments
continue
to the
along.
21
So now we have $1,021,000, which are essentially one-time savings as related to the COVID scenario. Now, in addition to that, we need another almost $1,600,000, $1,581,000 to get to our zero mill rate increase. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, there it is right there, $1,581,000, right? So now what you've got is you've got another $855,000 from the town side, including a 0% wage increase, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that then takes us down to a number of $706,000 of additional money that would need to come from somewhere, assuming we're okay with all those. I'm not saying I'm okay with all the town at 855, but assuming we are, there's $726,000 left that we have to make up to get to that 2.6 million. And that's either got to come from the Board of Ed or from fund balance or from other places. Does that make sense?
To me, it does.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So, I mean, all right, yeah, so that's where, basically where we are there. We're at the 76. Okay. So that makes sense.
756
I'm just in my
is-
own, I mean, we're all looking at this slightly different ways, and it's
Yes.
confusing when we're looking at it in kind of piecemeal up here. So I just want to make sure that I've gone through the numbers correctly. So in my mind, we've got to, assuming we're not looking to make any adjustments on anything we've talked about on the town side and the 2020 COVID savings, we've got to come up with another $726,000 somewhere, somehow.
Sorry, no, I think it's just slightly different. That it's the 756 on this spreadsheet. I think there's a slight edit. It's actually the 825 that is still remaining. 825,000
Okay.
is the remaining distance. Yep. But the
Yeah, 'cause we went-
756
so you
is
found
actually
another
just the sum.
855 in the 2021 budget from the town side. So that reduces the 1,581,000 by 855. And that net number
That's
is what we've got to find. Is that the 756?
No, see, what's confusing it is that the Board of Ed at this point, all we've done to the Board of Ed is go up by the 98,000. So when you combine the 98 going up and the 855 in cuts, that's where you get the 756 number. The distance we have remaining, if you take 1.5 million less the 750, is this 0.29 mils, which is $825,000. So that's how much farther we have to go to zero in the red.
But Sean,
Well,
that's before
yeah,
we've even touched
it's
the
really
board.
726,000 if you, but you got to pull the way you did it with the Board of Ed money. I understand. It's all right. I got it. I understand it. Sorry to drag everyone through this, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding it. So we still have a ways to go. I mean, we're not that close. And the other thing is, I think we've got to start talking about how do we manage these one-time savings and also the increase in debt service in year two. Those two scenarios are almost $2 million of additional costs we're going to have next year's budget. Forget any labor increases that we might have to deal with and any other increases. So I know I've been hammering this home, but we can't lose sight of that. Because you just took basically $1 million of one-time savings and carried it over. And then you got debt service going up, what, Jim, almost 800,000 next year?
Yeah, that's what it's projected.
So, I mean, unless there's some other miracle dollars coming somewhere, you know, those two numbers just jump out at me as big numbers that we have to make up in the following budget. So anyway, okay, thank you.
Sean, refresh my memory. What's the 100,000 BOE jump?
So that's driven by the pension ARC adjustment. And so, Jim, you want to walk through what's happening? That's a little bit of a wash.
Basically, if you recall, we're looking at a couple of actuarial assumption changes.
Yep.
And that was an increase in the cost of the pensions. But when the Board of Ed adopted their budget, and they do it a lot earlier than we do, we didn't have any of worries yet. So they just kind of budgeted status quo with the prior year and didn't have a built-in increase as Sean had already built into the budget when he did it. So that's why when we do a 2-year smoothing option, we actually, on line 5, on the town side, we're actually reducing what Sean put in his budget. But the Board of Ed, since they never put an increase in to begin with, ends up having to put at least an increase. It would have actually been a bigger increase if we didn't consider the smoothing option.
Yep, very good. Thank you.
And I have to say also, my concern about that is we all know what happened with the stock market. Now, I was at the beginning of the pension board meeting last week, and they aren't as bad as some other organizations, and they're down about 10% as of April 30. And so they're down certainly, but not as much. But nonetheless, that's money that's also going to have to get made up, because when we go through and have the actuary do what the mandatory is over time, and now we've stretched it out to 25 years, I think, to be able to, which is the maximum. So that means that whatever we're short, we can put in a little bit each year to get caught up over 25 years. And that's quite a long time. So we are going to get a hit because you can't stretch it out any further. So next year we're going to get a hit with this when we have that done. So that's also a factor as well for next year.
That's a quick question, David.
Yes, yeah, Jim.
So as far as the one time we're thinking of as one-time hits, you know, the police officer position, library positions, recreation position. I mean, these are positions that I guess we talked about before that theoretically we could go another year perhaps without bringing those back. What about the assessor position vacancy? Is that something that's a little bit more potentially urgent, or what is that? Is that an assistant assessor, or what is the status of that position?
Yeah, so that department historically has had 4 positions in it. Right now we're operating with 2, really, because last year in the budget I reduced that. There was a swing position that was more like 3.5 last year, and now it was 3 ending this year, and then now we have the vacancy. And what's really the town assessor position, we have the assistant right now serving as the acting assessor. So certainly, you know, I think that is a concern. I think long term, with an assessor's department, you know, there are things that you would like to have your assessor doing, including going out on the road and doing assessments, visual inspections, trying to find things that maybe haven't been on the grand list that should have been in the first place. So I think as you reduce the staff, I mean, that some of that stuff will be happening less, frankly. I think the core work we've been able to manage, frankly, for over 6 months now with just the 2. Granted, it's also included the COVID situation where general public access to town hall has been reduced, but so hopefully we're not in that environment into the next fiscal year. But I would say that, you know, I think 3 is a good number to run an assessor's department. So I think planning for 2 is going to be on the lean side for sure. Certainly when people have to take a day off or get ill, you know, you're left with just one person in the office. But, you know, I think it's something that we could certainly try entering into the year. And we do have the benefit of, I have kept in the budget that position we created last year, which is moving into a general services clerk position that we kind of share amongst planning and zoning, but also town clerk and also assessor and tax. We have somebody who swings through, particularly when there's somebody's out of the office and we need somebody in there to back up on, get caught up on work from that's backing up. So we have some flexibility there, which is what I like about that position. So, but I think Jim could speak to it as. Yep, go for it.
If I could just add to that, Sean, you know, I think it would be more critical if we did not have the reval process behind us. At least that's been completed, and you know, we do have a handful of cases that'll be going to court that we'll be working on in the coming months. But at least the core work on the revals passed us at least for another few years.
That's right.
Okay, so we're thinking, I mean, a year perhaps, but this isn't probably something we can push much longer than that, you're thinking? Or we want to?
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to evaluate, certainly if we're back up, I hope, to full availability and town hall, full open hours and as soon as we can. I think we're gonna have to evaluate how it goes with 2 staffing that way when the counter is fully open and everything else. So, but yeah, I mean, the proposal here, and I think we can, you know, I certainly have some concerns about it, but I think we can try it for the year and see how it goes. And if we need to course correct, you know, we'll be back doing this budget development in 6 months. So we start this process in November and December.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions or comments?
I think Rob has his hand up.
Dave?
Okay, yeah, Rob, I don't
Just to
see
follow
photos.
up on Jim, you know, he's raising some good points about these items. There are some here that I think are potentially one-time expenses that potentially bring back. And so that continues to underscore my biggest concern here. I don't know. I know the police officer position, the chief had said he wasn't sure he could fill that anyway for 12 months because of the academy being shut down and being able to fill it. So we may just by that default not be able to fill it. But, you know, I think we'd have to talk about whether we want to fill that when that opens up again. So there are a number of these that could be added to the one-time list that Sean didn't put as one-time expenses. And I get why you didn't, Sean. There, you know, these are potentials. It's not,
Right.
this is gray. This isn't black and white. But it just underscores my concern about, you know, the rebound effect of the next year budget. And I think what I'm interested in seeing is, and I don't recall the number right in front of me, but what was the number for the 0% on the Board of Ed side? If all of their labor went to 0% in this budget, what was that total of savings? Do you remember, Sean? Or does anybody remember that?
I have that.
I know
think it
you
was like-
got it. I just can't put my fingers on it.
I think it was like 2.1, if I recall.
Was like 1.1 or so, but
No,
that
I think
included-
1.1.
And if you didn't, because the step may be, you know, a different animal than a raise.
Yeah, I thought it was a lot lower than 2.1.
Yes.
I would say 1.1, but
Yeah,
that's.
And then
I
the
thought it was
seems a
1.1 with
number.
steps.
with step.
1.1 with steps. I thought it was closer to
I thought it was like
800
closer to
without
800.
steps, something like
Yeah,
that.
I thought it was
800 is what I have.
850 plus and then 1.1 or something.
Yeah,
That's right.
that sounds right.
That sounds like what I have.
Yeah.
So just in my mind, because we've got the $255,000 in here for the town side, and I know we don't control the Board of Ed negotiating, but if you package all of this, assuming we get that extra $800,000 from the Board of Ed side, and then you look at the fund balance and some of the problems coming over the next couple of years, the feeling is we've got to kind of smooth all of this over more than 1 year budget. And that's how I'm looking at it. I don't know if anybody else agrees with that, but I just wanted to kind of throw it out there that, you know, again, we're not looking at this as a 1 year vacuum. So these savings need to be kind of, in my opinion, spooned across a couple of years to deal with the rebounds of the one-time expenses, plus the uncertainty of the economy in that second year.
Well, that I agree 100% personally, and that's why I'm glad we're not zeroing out our fund balance in order to have all these expenditures. We're still leaving about 10.5%, which is only slightly higher than what the rating agencies want. They want the 9.5%. I think our policy is 9.25%, and so we're leaving a little bit of wiggle room there because we have to make up this $2 million in surplus that we're using here, $1 million of which one time, and 800,000 of which is just because we had a surplus. We were going to use that anyway in Sean's initial recommendation. So I think we've got that to make up. And
Well,
so
remember, Dave, you got another 800 some odd $1,000 in debt service.
in debt service, right? Yep, exactly. And you're going to have a bigger number in pension. And we're going to reconsider whether some of these positions can be put back, the following year. So there's going to be a lot of pressures on next year, as opposed to what this year is right now.
Just to follow up on the question you had, Rob, I have the number here from the Board of Ed is 1.15 million is the total of zero, and of that 280,000 is steps, which leaves 800.
Thank you, Sean.
Sure.
All right. Are there other comments? Are there other council members who would like to consider adding some things back, taking some other things out?
Dave, I have a question.
Sure. Yeah.
Just because we're assuming that 255,000 would be with a zero increase, but what happens if it doesn't come to fruition and we can't get that? I mean, I'm hoping that we can, but if not, then we're going to have to. And how soon before we do this budget will we know? I mean, or will we know?
Well, you'll have to cut the budget, whatever that differential is, further to make up for it.
Yeah.
Or
Positions,
you have
furlough
further
days.
layoffs or whatever.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that's what I'm assuming. But I mean, there's never any guarantee. Like, same on the school side. They're going to have to figure it out if it's not a 0% increase, and they're going to have to figure it out on their side too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the good news, Don, is, and I say further layoffs, this doesn't account for any layoffs.
Right.
So we're just not going to fill certain positions that are vacant. If that
I think it's
scenario
great.
happens, we might have to consider layoffs. Same thing with the Board of Ed side. If they can't get their unions to do their part like everyone else in the economy is, then as far as I'm concerned, that's a decision that they make. And if that results in layoffs or larger class sizes, that's a decision they've made, their unions have made, not the town council. Because
Well,
I
if
know
they-
they're going to blame the big bad council for delivering a budget that doesn't support their raises. But when they're asking for a 3.1% raise when the rest of the world is getting less than they got this year, they need to do their part. We see the signs all over the country. We're in this together. We're standing shoulder to shoulder. Well, let's see if that's the case.
Well, and in this day and age, with all these businesses that people who have been on unemployment, many of these people may not have a job to go back to after things get better, and that's I think what we're doing without laying off anybody is incredible, because most businesses are looking at it and saying we're gonna have to lay off people just to reopen, and I think keeping it without laying off, yeah, okay, people might not get an increase this year, but you know, it's the sign of the times right now.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
David,
Sean, when will we get an update using April's medical trust numbers? Will it be by next week when we have to adopt? Or is this the best number we have is what was in the budget still because of how March and February came in?
You know, I would have to confirm with Jim. I know that Donna was running numbers on April just on Friday. So I'd have to confirm if we have, my understanding was it was largely in line with the projections from March. So I don't think there was a significant change. I know Jim looks like, I think he just had to walk away from his computer. So I'll have to confirm with him. But I think I haven't been notified that there was anything significantly positive or negative from the updated analysis.
All right. And
I believe we have the numbers though.
All right. So you'll get to us hopefully this week with what work product was done as of Friday. And, but it sounds like we're probably in line with what you had projected. So there may not be much in line 20. How about line 21? What's up with that now?
Yeah, so 21, we have, there were some ongoing conversations there today. And I know that actually Jim met with both Elizabeth and John this afternoon to talk through some scenarios there. And I see Jim coming back to his computer now. But, you know, I think that we were looking at possibly having Elizabeth or John come tomorrow night to kind of walk through some of the scenarios. The biggest challenge, of course, is how much is assumed in revenues. Jim, we're talking about the Park and Rec for whether summer camp happens or not. We have some initial numbers that walk through one scenario. Again, a lot of this is the uncertainty that we're all dealing with, just how what this will look like next spring as we try to adjust some of these numbers. But Jim, do you want to walk through, or do you want me to put up on the screen some of the stuff we were just looking at a couple hours ago?
Maybe you could put that summary up. At least we could get it out there, and so people have an idea.
Maybe talk about it. And maybe we could talk about it tomorrow night with John and Elizabeth too. So, but yeah, maybe if you give me a second, I can share. Do you want me to share the screen that had the orange and yellow numbers?
I had an email I sent you a little earlier, Sean, on the pool.
All right, give me a second. I'm sorry, Jim, on the pool, or we were talking about summer camps first, though, right?
Well, it's got pool and recreation. At 623. Thought I did anyway.
You mean at 423, the 423 one?
Yeah. No. I'm sorry.
So let me share this. All right, well, I'll pull them both up. We can decide which one you want to walk through. All right, give me 1 second. Just share this. All right, Jim, this is what you sent me at 6:17. But this doesn't have, okay.
So this is kind of high level, but I think for purposes of tonight anyway, I know I talked to Sheila this morning, and you know, it's still hard, I think, for her to kind of grasp what things might look like at the pool 3 months from now or even 6 months from now. But she tried to take a more of a conservative approach as to, you know, really with probably a multitude of restrictions as to how many people she can have, and in perhaps, rotating people in out more often, the elimination of some of the meets that they're going to have in the summer and fall. So she came up with a $97,000 reduction in revenue, which, if that's all there was here, that would be another hit to the general fund because the general fund subsidizes the pool. I would kind of want her to kind of, go through in more detail how she came up with that. But I think that's her best projection right now for the first 6 months of the fiscal year, based on her projected slowdown in operations there. She did have some additional offsetting expenses. We already had cut, if you recall, some temporary part-time that I mentioned, I talked about a little bit earlier tonight, and that was, I believe, over 50,000, or even more than that, I think 70,000, Sean, of cuts that were for proposed increases to the lifeguards to get them a step above minimum wage. These cuts here would, for the temporary part-time, $22,982, are associated with the decrease in activity that she's projecting in that decrease in revenue. There was another consulting fee for $3,000, and again, I'd want her to speak to that a little bit. Apparently, they have someone come out on an annual basis from Horizon to do an inspection of the facility. Whether they can accomplish that through some other means at a lesser cost.
Didn't John, excuse me, didn't John say that he was bringing in a consultant to go through everything?
Yeah, we're doing that separately, Don. I just actually was authorizing that today. We're moving forward with a consultant through project planning funds and on the capital side.
So would you need that? So
right, that's why.
That's a good question, and I don't know the answer, and I think I'd again defer to Sheila on that, whether that it dovetails with that initiative or not.
Okay.
So that's the pool, and then there's some RecTrack software that was, I think, originally in the parks budget, but really should be allocated to the pool. So that was just another add on the pool. For the recreation, again, a lot of this, there's a reduction, a proposed or projected reduction of 110,000 in their revenues, mostly as a result of summer camps, from what I understand, and other programs as well. But I guess the good news is the expenditures associated with those programs would more than offset that revenue decrease. So they had expenditure projection decreases of 179,000, but we had already taken into consideration the secretary position. So anyway, overall for recreation, we'd end up with a favorable adjustment on the general fund of about 17,000.
But 69,000 net to the earlier document because we included the 52.
Exactly.
So it's pretty much as a wash with the pool above. All right. So
I guess you could say that, right.
And this is all next fiscal year, right? This is all July 1 on. All
yeah.
FY21. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I have maybe just while we're on this spreadsheet,
Yep.
Sean, just below, there's a couple more adjustments that the Parks Department had traditionally paid for their RecTrack software, but they cut it out of there. That was in the reductions up above in anticipation of us reclassifying that expense into the technology fund where we have a lot of other softwares. So that would actually be an increase to technology and a corresponding decrease in fine arts because it would be included in the technology fund up above. So that's just a little bit of a reclassification, but those two adjustments are part and parcel of what is shown above in the rec department.
So the net of all of this that's not included on the other sheet is about $15,000 the wrong way. So I'm assuming we'll get an update for tomorrow's meeting where you put these things on the other spreadsheet. So it's all.
That was my plan. I think I wanted to show it to you first, and then I'll update the sheet for tomorrow, include those.
Yeah. All right. So in the big scheme of the big numbers we're talking about, the updates are almost a wash.
Exactly.
That's fair.
Right. So David, I just want to make sure I understood. So that the pool subsidy, we have to throw more money in, but the recreation department with the savings are going to basically balance those out, correct? Based on those numbers, if you factor in the secretary already, and so basically the pool and the recreation department are going to balance out.
I think that's a fair statement.
I think that's right.
Right. Okay. So yeah. So we're not. So then for summer camp not happening this summer isn't going to really generate us a whole lot of savings because it's going to be balanced out by other things. Okay.
Yeah, at the end of the day,
yeah, part of the challenge
tomorrow, you shouldn't see a big difference.
And I think part of the challenge on the pool side, with respect to those revenue losses, the assumptions we're making there, and again, a lot of this will remain to be seen. I think we're expecting additional camp and pool guidance as recent as this week, as I've heard from the news this morning. So some of this will depend, but some of those revenue items that we were assuming would be lost include, the birthday parties and the meets, which are actually probably more of our money makers because we don't have to put a lot of labor out there, right? To man a birthday party or to run a meet, they basically are renting the facility. So it's kind of all a hit to revenue as opposed to some of those revenue hits where you have corresponding expenditures because you don't need to staff them fully or whatever. So as we were looking closer at them, there, things like that. If those kind of activities are not permitted, or if there's no, fall swim season or whatever, that's what's kind of assumed in those numbers. And we're hoping for the best, but we're trying to be conservative with those revenues.
Oh, so Sean, are you saying that that the numbers you have, the estimates you're making are sort of the worst case scenario as if none of these things happen?
Well, yeah, I hesitate to say worst case scenario.
Obviously, it can always get worse, but
Sheila was calling it, and as Jim was going through it, kind of our more conservative estimates, assuming yes, that those things were not happening. Without maybe getting to the point where the pool would still be operating, right? So whether it's with reduced capacity, but that's with the pool operating, so it still has a lot of the same expenditure components,
but
opposed
without
to a shuttered pool, for instance.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Thanks. So it could get to be, depending on how this works out, it could get a better number. So planning as if it's going to be a bad, with all those things not being there. Thanks.
Because that was no meets, I think, Jim, through December, correct? I think that's what the last I had
I think that's, yeah.
I mean, so I guess it could get worse if there are no meets after December. But again, we'll just have to see.
All right. Other council comments or questions? I mean, it seems to me without hearing a lot of requests to change some of these or add some of these things back, we're sort of settling into a general outline of where we're going.
David, quick question. Dave,
I'm sorry.
Just if I could, question. I
Dave,
agree with
sure.
you. Yeah, my concern is, or my question is, and I agree with Rob. What Rob had talked about before is looking at some of these expenditures. We're obviously going to have to look in how do we smooth going forward. But are there, so we got to look at possible other things to look at and cut potential cuts. But this is definitely something, it's going to be. If we're looking at this, where are those, Sean, maybe this question for you, where are those big cuts? If we had to try to make cuts to try to prepare for more, for next year's budget, I guess the question is, where's our next, the next layer of things that we could look at? I mean, we're looking at a lot of one-time expenditures, but we have other things too. And we really haven't even touched yet what we're going to do with the, sort of on the Board of Ed stuff. So.
Sure. I mean, if you'd like, I mean, I think basically, if you're talking about planning next year's budget, I think, we're trying to maintain this budget as best we can, keeping all of our services intact at their full level. I mean, I think there's no doubt we're, if we're looking next year and things are just as bad, certainly we'd have to start looking at some of the service level offerings, whether it's weekends or library, arts place, some of the places that you might have to go to adjust the amount of service that we're offering. But we're trying our best here is I think a lot of these cuts are with the intention of maintaining services to the best we can at their same level. So I think that would, in short.
Hey, Dave, if I could just jump in.
Yes,
on
Rob.
that. I think from my perspective, am I on mute? No, I'm okay. A lot of this has to do with where labor comes out on it, because if you pull up all of the savings, if you look at the Board of Ed wage at 0% increase, even if it's just for 1 year, our town side at 0%, plus the various savings that we've come up with, plus you look at potentially our fund balance, you're looking at potentially CNR. We've got $1 million in CNR, which I think we generally like to continue using. But nonetheless, we do fund $1 million each year in the CNR, and we haven't talked about that at all. If you total all of that stuff up, my gut is, and I haven't done that yet, but I think when you total all that up, you're going to be more than what we need for this year's budget to be at a 0 mill rate increase. So then we start looking at how much of the fund balance and some of these other things we can use to start smoothing that second year. So I'm not necessarily at the moment saying, okay, we got to find deeper cuts to go into that second year budget. I think if labor comes to the table the way we need them to, I'm not sure we have to cut that much deeper. I think we can use the total savings that we come up with in this conversation and begin to create some kind of a slush fund, if you will, for that second year. We did that when we were developing money for the water pollution control plan. And so that's how I see it, Dave. And I don't, it's a little different than your question to Sean, but I'm not sure, for me, the answer is to find more drastic cuts in our budget. It's to just try to find labor, get labor to the table, and the total of those expense savings we can smooth out over 2 years will help us get the job done. Maybe it won't at the end of the day, but I think when we see all the numbers, there's a lot of money there that we can play with over the next couple of years, if union comes to the table.
Yeah. Sylvia?
Yeah, I agree with Rob in that position. I think that we've done a pretty good job of identifying the things that we can cut and still maintain the level of services that our residents expect. And I think if anybody's understand that we have been judicious in trying to make those cuts and still maintain what they expect, they're also realistic to know that in the future, if this continues, we may have to be more difficult next year. I do think that the labor piece is the really important thing, and it's important that we get going on the town side first. And we have no say in the Board of Education except to continue to exert our opinions that say that should be reduced. But I think Rob is I don't see cutting this budget where we are now significantly at this point. I really don't. I think we've done a pretty good job of getting it down. Now, there may be a few nickel-dimey things we can cut still, but I don't see further huge reductions in this. And hopefully, I'm the optimist in the group that says we will come out of this and things will smooth out, and by the 6 months or 8 months, 6 months into this will be different. We can't guarantee that, but neither can we guarantee that they will be awful. So that's where I am.
If I may, I echo that sentiment, both Rob's and Sylvia's. I think we've sort of worked this pretty hard and gotten to the place on the town side. Now, I don't think we've spoken about education. I think we can work that a little harder, at least in my opinion. But that's another part of the conversation. And again, I'm just talking a total budget number. And of course, I did just step in, so I don't know if I missed a whole lot, but you don't need to repeat it. I'll just start paying attention.
Well, you missed an update that we got of a few departments, mainly recreation, that actually netted about even, and they'll show up on the spreadsheet with adjustments tomorrow when they get a chance to do that. Dave, you had your hand up? We can't hear you.
Yeah. There we go. And no, I agree with Rob and I agree with Sylvia, and I think see where our, and I'm not necessarily looking for any necessarily more drafts now in this budget. I think we've done a good job where we are, and we still have the Board of Ed side to do, as well as other things we can still find. But I think we're doing a great job of getting to where we need to be for this year. I was just trying to get a better feel for if and when we need to, or we have the possibility that things don't go as well as they go, where is that next round of possibilities to come from? Because obviously it's important we maintain services, and the town's people definitely look to us to make sure that we keep Cheshire a place that provides good services. They recognize the condition of the economy and where we are now, but it's very important that obviously we provide for the possibility that we still need to address some of these issues going forward, and they may even arise in the coming year, and so those are still things that we have to work. So I just wanted to see where that next, if we have to, where that possibility is. But I think we're doing a great job now getting to where we are in this current budget, and we still have some work to do. But I think we've done a great job so far. So thank you.
All right. Other council comments and questions? I mean, at this point, it appears as though, like I said, we've kind of come to a consensus for the moment, and we certainly have another week to go, but come to a consensus for the moment that the general town government looks like what we want it to look like. Next we can go with Board of Ed, then we can go into revenues, if there's any revenues that we need to adjust either way. Those are other things that we need to look at as well to get the final pieces together. Is there anybody who is in favor of cutting or using less fund balance, or using more fund balance? Those are things we need to have that conversation too. I think what we ended up settling with this workout is just that we use essentially what the town manager had recommended, which is the $800,000 from savings that was generated and known before March 10th, and then the COVID savings of about $1 million, and apply all of that to next year's. And of course, as the mayor keeps saying, that all has to be made up again. So Rob, you have your...
Well, David, I would just say I'm not 100% prepared to answer that I'm comfortable with the fund balance that we're using yet. And I think Peter's, I see him nodding his head and waving. I think we need to see the totality of the numbers and plug in the Board of Ed side. And once we see all that, it'll lay a bigger picture for me to be able to ascertain that. Again, and I'm looking forward to the next year budget as well. And the only last thing I would add to this whole conversation is the fact that we know we've got school modernization on the horizon. We've got potentially a large capital project that we have to consider. Our per capita debt, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but our per capita debt that we look at compared to like-kind communities, I saw in our book we had like 12 like-kind communities, and our per capita debt's on the high end already. We're at number 10, 11, or somewhere out of 12. We're AAA rated credit, and we're better than a lot of other communities in that regard. So we have other areas which are better, but our fund balance and our per capita debt are on the higher end of that. So it's not like we've got a lot of room to play with there. So that's why I keep bringing up this fact about our debt service spike next year, concerns about school modernization. We can't just look at this as a one-year vacuum budget, because I'm definitely afraid it can come back and haunt us later if we do. So I apologize for keep driving that point, but I think it's important.
Well, Peter, and then Sylvia. Peter, you had...
Thank you. Yeah, Rob, I'm glad you got the email and read it exactly like I wrote it for you. So, no, I was thinking the exact same thing, that I think you need to look at the totality of it. We need to take a look at Board of Ed. We need to finalize those numbers. I think we're at a good place, at least for right now, on the town side. I think we need to see the Board of Ed roll everything up together, we stand, and then take a look at things, and we can adjust from there. But, and David, I understand where you're going with your question, but this is one budget year at a time right now. And I know, as Rob has said many times, that these one-timers may come back to bite us, and that's true. But I think we get to where we need to get to this year, and then take it 1 year at a time and see where we are. Because nobody has the crystal ball to like Sylvia said, that let's hope of the coming fiscal year that we're looking at changes.
I thought we were on that sleigh ride, our last meeting. I thought we plugged in a number for Board of Ed as far as surplus went and came up with a number. And I think it was close to $905,000 of a cut.
Well, it's 800. It's in there. Let's hear from Sylvia first, and then I'm going to ask Sean to put that up because that's kind of a number that gets backed into if we want to leave everything else the way it is. Sylvia?
I agree with Peter and Rob, and I think my biggest thought about that was those of us who've been on the council for a long time realize that with, as Rob said, when we were faced with the sewer treatment plant debt and so on, we really worked hard for that wasn't a huge impact. And as you look at the figures, that debt service came down fairly significantly over a course of time as we planned it would. Now it's going back up again. That's where we have to be careful. But if we're thinking ahead on how to smooth that, we may be able to solve those school modernization things a little bit easier. So I agree with Rob and Peter that we need to think ahead, but I also think that this year we have no idea what's going to happen a year from now. We may be back to normal or we may not be at all back to normal. So we have to keep that in the back of our mind, but we need to figure this budget for today and move forward in that direction. So end of story.
All right. Thank you. All right, Sean, can we see the spreadsheet that shows the roughly 800,000 on general town government, and then using all the COVID savings, and then that leaves us a number left right in the pink box there of $825,000 that we need. And if we reduce the Board of Ed's request by that gives them $1.4 million more than they have this year, and it gives them about a 2% increase. So we got the general town government savings. We've got that $98,000 a little additional expense, but for the Board of Ed, but it leaves us like I said, the 825,000. There you go. Okay, so you're gonna plug it in and see we're at that 2.6 million that we needed.
Dave, can we go over what the original Board of Ed budget was? Because I thought they had cut their budget down to a $2.1 million increase.
They did cut
is
it to
correct?
that much.
And then if we cut it, this 800 some odd thousand, is that the number that you're referring to?
Yeah, it gives them
Okay.
the 1.4. The number's right in there.
Okay,
is that
thanks,
right,
Dave.
Sean?
Just making
1.4?
sure I'm following.
99 or 2%.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
So what does
So
that
that's
give us
the-
then?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry,
Peter?
David. What does that give us then? If that's the case, then are we reducing general government by as much as we're reducing education?
Yeah. It's slightly off because the Board of Ed, while they're getting 825 reduced and we're getting 855 reduced, they're getting 98 added on. We've already adjusted for that. So, but essentially the numbers are very similar. We've reduced 1/3 of the budget by the same amount that we're asking for a reduction of 2/3 of the budget.
But not percentage-wise.
No, that's why the Board of Ed will have a 2% increase at these numbers,
Right.
these draft numbers.
Well, but remember though, they're also bringing forward a lot more one-time savings from the 20 budget than we are.
Right, they're bringing 750,000. We're bringing 260.
Right. So I think you kind of got to look at the totality of it versus
Right.
if you're trying to get to a better percentage. And I know probably, Peter, where you're going. It looks like the town side is taking the brunt of this. If you look at that alone, that's correct. But if you look at the savings that we're carrying forward from COVID 2020, I think the numbers change a bit. Correct, David?
Yeah, it does. We're giving them back all their savings plus, plus 700,000, whereas we're getting 408.
Did we get
the
the
only thing I
revenue
would point out on that, the only thing I would point out is that we're owning all the revenue shortfalls on the town side. Just so the actual expenditure cuts were much higher than the 286, but we had the investment income and also, of course, park and rec income and other pieces that were legitimately on the town side. But some of those, all the revenues ultimately are shared, so to speak, but we own them all on the town side of those surplus numbers, just for what it's worth.
Well, I guess the point is the town is doing more than its fair share under the way it's laying out right here.
May I make
Oh, go ahead.
a
Yeah.
suggestion or a
Yeah.
comment or whatever? I'm sorry, I can only see one at a time and
Yeah,
got a
me
big
too.
mouth anyway. I remember in conversations that we did have regarding the salary increases, and Vin gave us a total of $1,150,000
Yep.
of and STEP accounted for 280,000 of that number, and that left $870,000 without the step. It's my view, because they've expressed to us that they have some options potentially that they can exercise forward. I think we should. I would take a deep dive and cut $1,150,000. Doesn't sound draconian to many, but or maybe it does to everybody, but it doesn't to me. I would increase their reduction because I think they can find it. And I think it will help. It will help us a lot.
Okay, Don? Oh, we gotta hear you. Sorry.
Sorry,
Hey.
just had a quick question. I have to leave shortly after this, but I just had a quick question about, did we get the total amount of revenue savings from the Board of Ed yet through the end of the school year? Because I know that, it was still, originally it was till June 1st, but now I know it might not be a whole lot,
Yeah.
but I mean, have they given us
That-
a total amount yet?
That includes that total amount less the 200,000 we're allowing them to keep in that account that we set up the other day, which we haven't voted on the 200,000, but that allows them the amount they need for COVID additional expenses in the next fiscal year. But that 747 includes about $80,000 or $100,000 more than they originally had told us because of those few days in June when there's not school that they had hoped for.
And that includes whatever the bus company's going to be
That's
giving
exactly.
back?
That
Do you know
includes
what that
all of
was? Do you remember what that was?
the additional savings for June, because there were only a
Well,
few
no,
school
just
days.
the total for the bus company
Oh,
because the
100 and
percentage,
something thousand. I think it was not. It
Okay.
was 15% or something.
15%. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I apologize. I have another commitment, but I have to leave now. So thank
Okay. Enjoy. All right, Peter.
Don, wish Kara our congratulations, by the
Yeah.
way, before you go.
Congrats, Don.
Yeah, that's great.
So,
Couldn't think of a better reason than to leave a council meeting.
exactly.
All right. Let's
So
see.
for,
Other than hitting lotto, of course.
Yeah. Hey, no, then I do this full time.
David, quick question.
Sure. Yeah. I saw Peter's hand,
Yep.
but I think I
Sorry,
heard
no,
David.
Dave
Right,
Vella-
David
yep.
and then Peter.
Yep.
Okay, Dave.
So we have already included into this factored in the 2% holdback or whatever the Board of Ed wanted to.
It's not going to be 2%.
Not the 2%, the 200,000, right?
200,000 is what they're
right.
saying they're going to need for additional COVID-related expenses in the next fiscal year. That is accounted for. That's not in the 747. They're actually going to have 947.
Got it. Okay. But we're going to let them, but they're going to have to hold that back. Okay.
Right.
I just wanted to make sure that was factored into that 200,000 was already factored into
Yes.
these numbers. Perfect. Thank you.
It is. Good. All right. Yeah, Peter. Thank you.
I did have more than just wishing Kara.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
That's okay. Happy to let Mr. Veliber in, but I think it's ironic that and I'm gonna, for the most part, I'm going to agree with Mr. Slocum. I know we're only 2 properties away, but sometimes it seems like we're worlds apart. But I'm going to agree with him on this one, but for a slightly different reason. I'd like to see us have another sit down with the Board of Education to look at numbers. I don't want to just pull the 1.15 based on the salary number, but I also don't want to start 21 with giving them a $1.5 million increase, only because what we've said about the great unknown of the 21-22 budget. So I think if we cut back on that, it gives us a better starting point when we start looking at future budgets.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to have an impact for assessment from them as well of the 800,000 or the 1.1 million, because I'd like to see what their thoughts are on that.
Well, we got an impact. They came up with an additional 800 some odd $1,000 of cuts beyond the COVID savings.
Right.
And they gave us a whole litany of how the impacts would be to the school system.
Right.
Now, that equaled approximately the wage increases less the steps. So, you guys can all do the math and figure this thing out. I mean, it's not rocket science at this point. And I think that's what Tim's kind of getting to. So,
yeah.
We've all got to do a little soul searching and come up with a decision.
My soul's easy to find.
Well,
a lot of people say I don't have one, Tim. So.
Well, that's the heart of darkness, I guess. You're right.
Perhaps we could invite some of the Board of Ed members, Finance Committee Chair and the Chairman, if they're able to come tomorrow night, because we already have a meeting scheduled. And it doesn't have to be a full board meeting, but it could be a meeting where we get answers from some of them and have the dialogue Peter was talking about. We need to have, and I agree, we do need to talk to them if we're starting to get close on numbers, especially with respect to the fact that they're a fellow elected body. And it would be nice to give the due respect that way to hear them. But does that?
But I just have a comment. I know you probably don't see me. I was waving my hand.
Sorry.
Don't forget, we did really have a pretty in-depth meeting with all of those folks. That was our last meeting. I think they were very aware, and I'm not suggesting they not be invited, but I don't think they will be surprised by something close to what we've talked about just now at all. And I believe we also heard methods to find the savings were discussed. And I realized they were discussed before. We can't elaborate here at this moment.
I agree with that. I'm not trying to not have them come back. We certainly want to give them as much additional time as they may want. We've given them a lot already, but I'm just stating that we have all the information that we're asking.
Okay.
So we have it, we can dive through it. To have them come back another time, I think is certainly a good idea, and I support that. But we know what those cuts will be if they don't get union concessions and they have to find another $850 some odd $1,000. They delineated all that for us already. And they gave us the whole list of priorities and impacts, et cetera. So we have it.
Yeah, we did get that. I think 4 weeks ago tonight, as a matter of fact, they had their meeting. And all right. So then what I'll do is I'll ask if we can have that resent out again, Sean, and maybe you can talk with them, and I'll talk to Adam as Budget Committee Chair over there, just to confirm if there's any updates to that. And hopefully we can have some information for tomorrow so we know what we're dealing with. Because we are down to the end. We have to adopt by next week.
Right.
So
and that's still Thursday? That's still Thursday, Mr. Bowery?
Well, I think, Rob, that's your choice. That we did want to, Arnett had asked us at the end of the meeting the other day, did we want to schedule for next Thursday? And certainly that makes sense, unless we want to do it Wednesday and have Thursday as a fallback, because Thursday's the last day.
Well, I thought we decided we probably needed as much time as we could, so we put it for Thursday. But if you want to try to do it Wednesday, I'm okay with that too.
Me too.
Well, I'm fine with either one. I just hate to
if
have us
we're
get to the
ready,
last minute
Wednesday's
something
fine by me. We just picked that date thinking we may need as much time as possible.
Right. So
But,
we have plenty of time
to Mr.
notice.
Talbot's point, though, certainly invite the leaders of the Board of Ed to either our meeting tomorrow night or however quickly they could come on, so that if there are members of this council that want to ask them questions directly, they should certainly have that ability to do so.
Yep, I agree.
I agree.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, let me see what we can do about seeing what their availability is now, Peter.
Sean, what do you need to finalize? So is Wednesday acceptable to you if we can finalize by Monday or something, or is Thursday better because that gives you the extra day?
I'm watching Jim. I mean, I know he's been updating the Yeah, exactly.
I,
Hey, I'm done whenever you're ready.
I'm
But
gonna do it next day, but if you you want to push it, I'll do everything I can get it put together.
Dave,
Monday's
my
Memorial Day, right?
staff has been working
There's a lot of
overtime.
yeah, that's true too.
I think giving them the extra day to make sure everything is right, and we don't have to put the extra pressure on them. From our perspective, I think it should be a big deal. That extra day to them may be a big deal.
I agree.
Okay.
Plus, Monday's Memorial Day, right? So they're all off.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah.
Just one thing, but I want to make sure that the mill rate calculations that correspond with that are correct, and certainly don't want to make any mistakes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dave, that's a great point. I think we keep it Thursday because we're losing Monday anyway.
Yeah.
I think so.
So we have a final budget committee meeting and deliberation session on Tuesday. And then we have Rob, you're on mute.
I was just saying, poor Jim's already lost enough here. We don't want him losing it.
Yeah. All right. So we'll plan on it. Tomorrow night we have where we can review some more of the numbers. We'll get the update. You'll show us a spreadsheet filled in with all the things that are the updates that we talked about earlier. I will be in contact with Adam. Rob, I'd ask if maybe you could reach out to Tony and see if those two as the leaders are available to come tomorrow night. We're meeting at 7 and see if they can see if there's any updates to the impact that their finance committee reviewed 4 weeks ago tonight. And then we would probably have on Tuesday a final meeting. We would get the numbers together and give staff time to do them and have them ready for Thursday. Does that sound like?
Sounds good.
caught
But
everybody's
I see Mr. Slocum has his hand up.
I'm sorry, I got to flip it over there. All right, sorry, Mr. Slocum. Tim, we can't. hear you.
Yeah, I know. Mine is simply a question of my absence, and I know I had introduced the topic of the of whatever we're going to do with the housing authority. Is that something we're going to address tomorrow, or did you guys address that while I was absent?
We did not address it, and that's a good point. That if we do it now, we don't have to tomorrow. So tomorrow could be quicker because we're starting later.
Right.
The late information we got this afternoon showed that the 3 towns CCM said that were like kind to us are at the same rate we are at the 10%. And so, I mean, I'm not so sure that a strong enough case has been made that we would want to deviate from what others have done. But I'm certainly open to all of you, especially those who have had more recent experience with this. And I would say, especially Sylvia as the liaison, or David, as former member and liaison.
I will speak to that for a minute. I agree in this budget year, it's a tough decision to make because we're cutting everywhere else. So in that regard, I'm a little reluctant. But on the other hand, I know what a good job they do and how they serve an underserved part of the community, which is far less than most communities have in the elderly housing type of market. So I understand that they're really, really struggling to keep the rents affordable and keep the community up to date. Having said that, they're requesting up to 10%. If we even gave them, I don't know the exact number that would be. And I don't have that right in front of me right this minute. I moved it somewhere under my pile of stuff. But even if we reduced it to 9%, is that a significant issue for us?
Well, it's $3,300 because it's 33,000. So each percentage point.
Okay,
would be
33,000. So that gets them some help. And if that was $3,300, and we did it for a couple of years and then looked at the budget again, and if they have some major issues, they have safety issues for the fire department and everybody to get redo driveways. They need to do sidewalks that are not handicap accessible. They need a lot of things, and it's tough. Their budget is tough. So is my budget, so is yours. So, I understand that whole process, but I hate to deny it completely. On the other hand, I think maybe if we could find a way to give them a little bit, I don't know how we're going to do that, but that's my sense. Anybody else have anything?
Yeah.
Well, to Sylvia's point, if it became 9% instead of 10%, that's going to buy a couple of doorknobs. I mean, that's really not the help they need. They would need us to vacate, to go probably eliminate it, which doesn't seem appropriate. But my real question is this: what are their sources of funding? Grants and the small rents they collect? I mean, how do they achieve, and federal subsidy? How do they raise money? The rents can't do anything for them.
No, the rents don't do anything. They get subsidies from the federal government, which are not large, and get grants, and they're applying for that community grant that they apply for every other year because we sort of we share with our human services department. That's about it. So it's tough. And I think if you read that information, I can't remember, there are 48 units, maybe there 50.
Yeah.
Something. So there's a lot of people that they serve. And it's about safety issues and health issues. If they aren't addressed, then they can't serve anybody. So there's the dilemma. But we don't have a lot of money either. So that's one of those dilemmas. It's very difficult.
Mr. Orris?
Yeah, I would just say, I don't want the public to mistake what we're saying. We have really supported them well. We've provided them a house for free. So, we've supported them in a lot of ways, in addition to the subsidy, which is in line with other communities. So I just think we've got to take a hard look at this. I mean, I'm not convinced that it's the town's responsibility to fully fund these organizations. And I think we've done a really good job of supporting them to this point. Now, with saying that, I certainly think we need to continue to look at ways to continue to support them and enhance what we can do for them. I'm just really concerned that now is not the time for us to be doing it. I think, I think if you go down the list of things and compared to other communities, you're going to see that we support them probably better than most. And so maybe down the road we can talk about doing more. But for me right now, in the situation we're in and all of the things we're asking other facets of our government to do, I have a hard time, supporting that reduction in revenue at the moment.
Rob, to speak to that, I can concur with that to a point. However, I don't know what the other communities do. We do not give them any services. They don't get plowed. They don't get trash collection. They get police protection if they need it, fire if they need it. But they're not getting the town services that we provide for other people as well. So they have to pay for all of those on their own, plowing their driveways and all of that. So I agree with you. It's a difficult place to be. David, who's the liaison to that group now? Not me.
Yeah, I think David Velaber. That's
no, not me. I think it's Jim.
Oh.
No, it's Don, I think, and he's
Don.
I think it's Don. Oh, Don. Okay.
Yep. Can't answer the question. So he may have some more up to date. I haven't been party to their specific issues financially in a couple of years. So it's just a human services kind of issue. That's all.
Yeah.
Just one more question. It has to go with town services because I know, Sylvia, you just cast it that the town provides no services. So does that mean that Beachport Road, whatever that road is called, that's not a town road, that's owned by that organization?
Yeah.
So that they're paying for that.
Mhm.
Okay.
And that's what the $600,000 grant they're going to come is going to allow that to be adjusted and I guess expanded and redone so that the fire trucks can get in.
Part of that will be sidewalks and for the fire department and a safety issue and improve parking kind of thing. I think to my understanding, the biggest issues are that the building was built so long ago that all of the interior water heaters and plumbing fixtures and flooring is all failing. And then that's an expensive proposition to fix, basically.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
They said to redo the tubs and the bathrooms, there's about $4,000 a unit. There's 48 units, and that money would go a ways towards helping that. But
exactly.
All right.
But if we don't have the money, we don't have the money. The reality is we can't do that. So, but is there a compromise there? I hear you, Rob. But is there a compromise there to do a little bit every year for the next 3 years, for instance? Then they could budget small projects because they do them one at a time because they can't displace the residents. So is there any value in that? I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not advocating for that, but I don't know. Just a thought.
All right. Other comments and thoughts on this?
Well, the only one I would project here, and it requires some feedback, but what would their cost savings be if we did plow that one area? Or is it impossible because you can't even get a fire truck down it?
We've looked at, I think before, I'd have to confirm with George, but I don't think that road or driveway was built to town standards. So I think there are issues with the
Okay.
curbing and the liability that comes along with that. I think it has been looked at before, but I'll
It was
follow up.
not, and indeed.
Yeah, and that's fine then. So that's we can't help in that regard.
Approved.
Okay.
They were approved to do that. I mean, they followed the zoning regulations at the time, but it's a
Right.
private driveway and it doesn't meet the
Right.
current.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we just don't know enough, I think, at this point. And like I said, any reductions are going to help them. So I think we have to let this sunset for now and just sort of maybe revisit it later.
Well, and
Not
as
in
hope
this
they get
budget. Not in this budget process.
if we were looking at next year, I think if hopefully they will apply for and receive the grant for this year, and maybe that'll help them get over the hump for this year, and then we could revisit again in another budget year.
Right. I think that's good advice.
Sounds like a consensus we're agreeing to, unless I see objections. All right. So that takes care of another open-ended issue. All right, it's getting on 8:00, one of the earlier nights, which is good. Unless there's other discussion, we're going to try to reach out to some board members, see if they have some update for us for tomorrow night when we meet at 7. See if there's an update to the numbers the superintendent had given their finance committee 4 weeks ago tonight, I believe. And then, we're probably have all the information we need to make a decision. All right.
Are we doing, are we
Peter?
doing executive session though? I know it's on the list, but I
Right.
assumed it was
Rob, is there
placeholder.
stuff to
Well,
update?
we have a placeholder for it. I was going to ask
Yeah.
Sean if he needs to go into executive session. I'm not aware of anything pressing, but Sean?
I think we were just going to go into it briefly to get a status check, make sure we're all on the same page for what the next steps are. So maybe if we could do that after Mike Solomon signs off, and if that's all right with you guys, that'd be good.
Yeah, that's fine. Then we'll take a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel matters to include our town manager, assistant town manager, human resources director, Mr. Zullo. Anybody else, Sean?
No, that should be it. I don't think.
Okay.
And I'll move
Jeopardy
that.
into it.
Or
Thank you,
Peter.
Mr. Barr. Second, Mr. Talbot, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Mike, thank you. And
Thanks,
Gina,
Mike.
I
Thanks,
see you.
Jim. Thanks,
Thank you.
Gina.